Hey, this is Rob Lundberg here. Welcome to conversation number 61. I hope you enjoyed that little jingle by Walter ETC and video produced by artist Kevin Gilmore. Dear listeners and viewers, apologies, I've been away for a bit enjoying some downtime. My conversation with the singer-songwriter Matt North started out by talking about the downward trends in the market that day, followed by his fascinating journey from the Midwest to Texas to Illinois, then onward to San Francisco with a stint in LA as a TV writer and a comedian at one point, all the while propelled by his love of music and writing. But that day I spoke to him in his home studio in Nashville, Tennessee, where he enjoyed the comfort of a family in a town vibrant with music. And of course, we touch upon his most recent album, Bullies In The Backyard, which has been out since February 11th this year, respectively. So please enjoy the journey of music, writing, and the story of a true bohemian, Rob Lundberg.
Oh, Matt. Well, it's a pleasure to meet you, sir. Where are you based, by the way? I'm not too familiar. Are you on the East Coast, West Coast, Midwest?
I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I've been here since 2010.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, wow. I was just gonna add that my twin sister's down there now. The last 5 years, she's been down there. Yeah.
It's a great city. We moved here from Los Angeles in 2010 with a mindset of, hey, if we don't like it, we can always go back. And we never hit that point. It just gets better and better every year. It's a great place to live.
I heard it's obviously a great music town as well.
That's what I've heard. Yeah. There's a lot of them here. The wait staff at the Waffle House are better musicians than everyone I know. You know, it's just great.
Yeah.
Everyone is so good and skilled in their own right. It's an exciting community to be in.
Well, Matt, to dive a bit into biographical stuff, how did your journey begin into music and into your career, and how did you kind of decide to really fully pursue it as a profession, I guess?
I started playing the drums when I was around 9 years old, and before that, I tried guitar, I tried piano, and I just couldn't get my head around it. Something about playing the drums, I was pretty quickly able to figure out what I'm supposed to do, enough to encourage me to keep coming back and keep trying. I remember I moved from Michigan to Illinois right around that same year when I was 9 years old. And a lot of folks I know who moved, in those young years, that first year in a new town is one of the worst years of your life. And that was certainly the case for me. But what I remember is that was the year I discovered the drums. A kid in my neighborhood up the block had a drum set in his garage, a red Sparkle Slingerland drum set. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I'd ride my bike over there as much as possible, and he would teach me. He was older than me. He was in high school, and he taught me how to play along to Kiss albums and Devo's Whip It, and that was what started it all. And I started playing music the old-fashioned American way in a garage, and kept up with it from there. Played in bands all through high school as a drummer, and really started working. I never made a decision. I always felt like I was a professional drummer because I was lucky. I took drum lessons from some really great teachers where I grew up in Champaign, Illinois, who would pass on their jobs to me that they were unavailable to play or uninterested in doing. And I very young age started playing in small blues and jazz quartets for weddings, bar mitzvahs, any function at the University of Illinois, just old school working musician kind of jobs. And really enjoyed it. I was watching a lot of my friends go get jobs at Baskin Robbins or retail jobs. And there I was getting paid to play the drums, and just felt like, I like this. This is what I want to do. And it was just always in my mind. I was a professional musician.
Now, at that time, what were you influenced by sonically, I guess, musically, and in that area, locally, I guess? Did you have any local favorites, or were there more just national kind of influences sound-wise?
There were. Champaign, Illinois had a fantastic music scene. At one time, Rolling Stone magazine called it Little Nashville.
Oh, wow.
It was there's a couple really great recording studios there. The University of Illinois jazz program is top flight. Always had it just always fed the best Chicago the best musicians up to the Chicago jazz scene are
Yeah.
all former University of Illinois jazz band
Oh,
players.
wow.
And at the time in the 1980s, the whole indie rock scene was very exciting in Champaign. I remember we had some local bands that got on the top 40 charts. We had a band called Last Gentleman that
Mm.
had a pop song called One Possession that got on top 40. Another band called Combo Audio had a song called Romanicide that got into the top 40. These were all acts right out of Champaign, Illinois that my friends and I used to go see. I would watch a great band called the Elvis Brothers. And I grew up playing with guitarist Jay Bennett,
Mm.
who he was in Wilco up until the Yankee Hotel Foxtrot album. And Jay was kind of one of our heroes. He was in college. I was a drummer in high school. I think we kind of looked at him as Arthur Fonzarelli. He was just the cool guy, in all the cool bands, great guitarist, great songwriter, a real mentor to all of us, and
Mm.
went on to do everything he did with Wilco. He's unfortunately passed away now.
Mm.
But the fact that I got to get near Jay and be in that scene with him, it was really inspiring. Just, all the bands at that time that were independently recording and independently promoting themselves. This was way before the internet, when we'd go to Kinko's and run off posters and flyers and get a big staple gun and go around town to the telephone poles. And if anything, it taught an entrepreneurial spirit that has filtered into everything I do now.
Mm.
And further that, as far as national acts, as a kid in the 80s, bands like The Replacements, REM, and The Clash are what I always point to as some of the most important albums that influenced me.
Mm. Mm. Now, so you said you did a stint in LA, or how long was that too?
I lived in Los Angeles for 13 years.
Oh,
I moved there in 1998, 97 or so,
Mm.
after living in San Francisco.
Mm.
I lived in San Francisco for about 3 years, played drums, hung out with a lot of cool comedians and filmmakers, and
Cool.
had a day job at the time working for Mother Jones Magazine as a fact checker and research associate. That was my first proper job out of college. And I was more interested in moving to San Francisco and looking for a band to join than I was working at Mother Jones. I pretty much hung out in their back storeroom and read back issues.
Yeah.
But, it was a great way to get to San Francisco and then down to Los Angeles.
Now, in college, did you study music, or was it more? It sounds like a bit more journalism, was it? Or I
On the back end, yes. On the beginning end, I got a scholarship out of high school to study music at North Texas State University,
Mhm.
Which among drummers, it's kind of, and jazz musicians, it's sort of the Harvard for jazz. It's an amazing school.
Yeah.
Things were going pretty well for me in high school as a drummer. I was competing in all those contests young drummers in school do, and got some attention, got some scholarship offers. And I majored in music, studied it for a few years, and realized, a lot of the musicians I admire, they either didn't major in music or they're music school dropouts. And I saw what I got from North Texas was I got near what I felt were some of the best young college musicians in the country at the time. And I was able to basically see how hard they work, what they do, and determine what I need to do. And my curiosities at the time as a student, whereas music was my main interest, went beyond all the time it was going to take to solely get a music degree. I wanted to study English, history, communications. And so I went back to the University of Illinois and left my scholarship in Texas and was invited to join the University of Illinois Jazz Band. I grew up, the director of the band is a guy named John Garvey. He was a mentor of mine growing up. He knew that I was just unhappy in sense with North Texas. The school, there were 150 drummers in the program, and I was doing fine, but I just wasn't responding to the culture of the school, and wanted to go back and get a general liberal arts degree and play in the University of Illinois Jazz Band. And that summer we ended up doing 2 to 3 months touring Russia and the Ukraine, which was, you know, a life-changing experience.
Now, was there a point of inflection, like say, like in San Fran, like when you're working, you're like, I just want to do music full time, and how do I do that? You know, and did you have at that time? Did you have label contacts, or like, or you just still doing independent stuff as well? Or?
Strictly independent stuff. At the time I was in San Francisco. That was an exciting period where I was there. 2 bands that stand out I got to see live in small clubs before they became very popular. One was Green Day, and
cool.
the other one was Cake. They're one of my favorite bands. I love what they do. But I was, you know, working a day job and always looking for musicians to play drums for. And at that time, was not even imagining myself as a songwriter. I was strictly wanting to find songwriters and play on records.
Well, yeah, I noticed on your bio, you have writing in your blood, though. Is that correct? Or in your family lineage?
Correct.
Can you talk about that a bit? Or
yeah. My great uncle is Jesse Stewart. He's a novelist and was the poet laureate of the state of Kentucky. And, you know, I luckily got to know him when I was very young, before he passed away, and we visited him and went over, and I got to see his room in the upstairs of his house where he secludes and focuses on writing. And it always looked very attractive to me. There was something about the introversion and the isolation of that just looked heavenly to me. And it, if anything, was just a personal example that this is possible, that you can have an idea in your mind and sit down and focus and write about it and turn it into something and get it out there to people. You know, hopefully all of our, you know, what I hope for, I'm a parent, what I hope for my son is that he develops habits reading regularly. And just by virtue of having a relative who was a very successful writer and having all of his books on our shelf in my house, it was very intriguing to me to get my head around, like, this guy is our uncle. And it was just a little bit of an extra motivation to want to sit down and read. So I read everything he wrote, and it was just a big influence and a big inspiration to want to try that too. I don't know if I would have had that motivation if the author wasn't my uncle.
Yeah. Interesting. And now, Eric, I'm going to just go back and forth and maybe not have any set construction to this conversation whatsoever. But we're going back to San Fran. What drove you to LA? Obviously, LA is LA, and it's. Did you have something already set up in LA, or just kind of picked up and moved to LA?
I had a reason to go. My time in San Francisco, it's sort of these interesting wayward years for me in my whole development. By the time I got to San Francisco in 1995, I'd actually already had, say, about a 12 to 14 year career playing drums.
Wow. Yeah.
Frankly, I was a little burned out on music. I'd been playing a long time. Well, there I was, making all kinds of interesting, creative friends in that community. Sunday nights in San Francisco at the Punchline Comedy Club downtown was the open mic night. And it was a popular scene, a popular hangout for anybody, even if you're not a comedian.
Yeah.
And I started going and hanging out, made a lot of friends in the comedy community in San Francisco, and started getting up on stage myself and
Really?
and doing 5 minutes, 10 minutes here, and it went pretty well. And next thing I knew, the club was asking me to open for national headlining acts, and I found myself working with Dave Chappelle, George Lopez, Greg Proops,
Oh, wow.
Dave Attell from New York.
Yep.
And as a guy who had played the drums for 15 years, it was just heaven for me to go, wait, you're going to pay me and I don't need to bring a bunch of drums and I don't have to split the paycheck with 3 or 4 guys in the band. It's just me. And it was a very welcome recess from all the time and effort I'd put into music. And I never backed away from music, but this was just something that came as a surprise, and there was no reason not to pursue it, no reason not to have fun with it. I ended up doing the Montreal Comedy Festival in 1997. Did a set at the Punchline, and the people were there auditioning comedians. And I got in 1 week after the Montreal Comedy Festival in 1997. I was down in LA taking meetings, to my surprise, with all the major networks who were talking to me about maybe doing the Matt North show.
Oh, wow.
Who knew? Who saw that coming? And I quickly whipped up a bunch of ideas and wrote down things of what kind of show could we create. And I sold a pitch to ABC Television. And this was one of those not uncommon deals where they sort of pay you money to not do anything anywhere else for a period of time in the hopes that we can develop something.
Yeah.
And so I got one of those deals from ABC. And, it was, on one hand, it was very exciting. On the other hand, I never saw it coming. I still can't believe that it happened. In my mind, I'm a musician who's still waiting to find my band.
Yeah.
But at the same time, here's this bizarre opportunity. Why not roll with it? But that's what got me to Los Angeles. I actually went into Los Angeles with my own show with ABC.
Whoa. Well, whoa. That's crazy though. But did you have any material initially when what was that first experience doing stand-up comparatively, as you like you said, you're 14, 15 years of drumming, but then here you are, just you, not the band, just yourself in front of that audience, and they're gonna either they're gonna give you feedback on your set comparatively to just music,
Exactly.
So I mean, I guess, how did you enter that first stand-up performance, I guess, or did you just kind of free form it, or did you already have a set or some material to kind of flesh out on stage?
It's interesting, actually. I arrived in San Francisco with maybe 5 or 10 minutes of really prepared professional material, and it's a great story why. I finally got I ended up graduating from college at Ohio University in Athens, Ohio.
Okay.
I went to 3 different colleges. The third was Ohio University. Well, there was a professor at Ohio University who taught a class in the journalism school on humor writing. And the teacher's name was Mel Hellitzer, who was a former advertising executive in Manhattan from the era that they created the whole Mad Men show out of. He came from that culture. He also was a former comedy writer in his day before he got into the ad business. He was a comedy writer for Ernie Kovacs, who is David Letterman's hero. Ernie Kovacs was one of the first kind of off-center, but kind of comedians who you either got him or you didn't. And I know Letterman really idolized him. And so there I was, learning comedy writing, joke writing skills in a class from this guy who had a history. He had co-written with Woody Allen. He'd co-written with Ernie Kovacs. And the final for that class, and it was a real popular thing on campus, was everyone in the class had to get up and do 5 minutes of material. That was your final. And it was in a local coffee house. and it was packed at the end of every semester for this class. And so we'd get up, and I got up and did my 5 minutes for my final, and it went really well. And it was just a lot of fun. Like you mentioned, what I love about stand-up comedy, and I don't do it anymore. It's probably been well over 20 years since I've gone near it.
Oh, wow.
But what's fantastic about it is you learn then and there if what you wrote works or fails.
Yeah.
And it's just immediate feedback. And what I learned, and I apply it to songwriting today, is you develop this intuition even before you get on stage, if something is going to work or not work. You just start to, I've noticed that my instincts get stronger and stronger, and I can be writing something and maybe I think it's a good idea, but I'll figure out, this isn't going to work. And but you know, it's really a great training ground for anyone who wants to go in any direction with writing, if you want to see immediately if your ideas are working.
Interesting. No, I actually, you know, to be honest, I didn't dive too deep into your bio because I just learned, speaking of news, of the passing of Louis Anderson, and you know, I had the fortunate in 2018, I get to capture him backstage up in Bethel Woods, New York, and so I was putting together a little imagery for social media, and it was just a cool experience to document a legend, and now it's just so kind of sudden that we're losing it. It seems like we're losing a lot of legends these days. But sorry to interject on that, but I just had to make a note on that too, as a side note. I was a bit distracted with that news, but.
Louis was fantastic. I did a week with him at the Improv in Tempe, Arizona, and he was very nice to me. You know?
Oh, he's a kind individual. I mean, he was running late due to the weather, and he had to run on stage to do his set. And initially, the plan was to shoot him prior to his set, and he didn't eat dinner yet, and he did like a 2-hour set, and he's like, 10, 15 minutes. And it was a pleasant experience for me of just seeing this guy who's been traveling all day due to weather, and you know, and still give me 10 to 15 minutes at a time, even after all that time traveling, doing his sets, and hadn't eaten yet. And I think that was part of his, you know, just his spirit, you know, just committing. If he said yes to something, he would do it, you know, generally. I think that's what he said. And he's a kind individual.
He's a consummate professional. I was always impressed with him. Whatever was happening in the day during the week, I worked with him. When it was showtime, he was ready to go, and he went up every night and he delivered. Every crowd went home very happy. You know, he understood. He knew what his job was.
Yeah. Oh, sorry to interject on that. I just had to make a note, and particularly when you were talking the comedian, comic aspect of your career, to go back to yourself and your LA adventures. So at the time when you signed that deal with ABC, were you working on music stuff still, or were you really fully committed to the show and developing that show, or the proposed show idea?
I was still very much always in my mind a musician. You know, looking back on that, I'd call it a 5-year chapter from age, say, 26 to 31. There were opportunities knocking on my door that in hindsight, it would have just been foolish not to explore them. I mean, when if ABC wants to hand someone a check and say, let's try to make a show, I just couldn't think of a reason to say no. But to be honest, you know, I never identified as a comedian. I never identified as an actor. I always felt like I'm a musician who's somehow sneaking through the back door and into this cool world of film and television, and the real actors and the real comedians, they're letting me hang around them and they're accepting me. They think I'm funny or they like what I'm writing, but I am a musician. You know, and I was always in a band or working with a certain songwriter. I've always made extra taught drum lessons. I have a small private drum teaching business myself, just it's just what I do. And so this period when I was in California, this little 5-year chapter, it was some stuff. Yes, I guess I was, I was pursuing it, but I wasn't like the other comedians who their big goal was to get that TV show. Their big goal was to get that HBO special. Those things never really occurred to me. But I really felt like I fit in culturally and socially. These are folks who became my friends. And we had, what I remember about Los Angeles was comedians and musicians socially have always blended. And I've almost every musician I meet and get to be close friends with, they all admit, I would love to do stand-up comedy. I've also never met a comedian who didn't have a great record collection or who also didn't secretly play the guitar or another instrument very well.
Interesting.
I'm friends with Mark Maron, and Mark Maron is a really good blues guitarist. And every other comedian that I've either worked with or been close friends with, just walking encyclopedia when it comes to a record collection. And so the two worlds seem to blend together very well. And I think now that I'm really focused on songwriting and I can reflect on how I focused my time and attention when I enjoyed writing jokes or screenplays, the way your mind works to thread a song together or to thread material together to engage an audience as a comic, it's very similar.
Well, sorry to interject. I was kind of reflecting on that, and I was like, yeah, it seems like there could be similar constructs and a similar kind of language between the two. Though initially, front-facing you to like, what, comedy and music, they don't go hand in hand, but maybe it's that, the stage, and I don't know, interesting. I haven't thought about too much of the back end theory of why they kind of go hand in hand, but
yeah. Well, it's to me, it's one thing that I remember not enjoying about stand-up comedy, and that is, as much as I have an affinity for comedy and love it, you're only allowed one result, and the result you have to pursue is laughter. What I enjoy about writing a song is, well, that pressure is completely gone. You can write a really good song and actually have nothing in it that's funny. You can write a song that elicits all kinds of thoughts and feelings from the listener. With comedy, you're pretty much going toward one destination, and that's to achieve getting a laugh from the crowd.
That's true.
But even so, what I remember having to learn was basically the 3 rules of comedy are get to the joke, and get to the joke. And I think songwriting, in a sense, is similar. There's a Nashville phrase, don't bore us, get to the chorus. Just the ability about understanding brevity is key. And how do you get to the point? How do you say something to grab their attention? How do you say, how hopefully what you're saying is relatable to the listener? Otherwise, you lose them.
Yeah.
So both of them have that in common. You just have to learn how to construct your message so it holds attention.
I guess also too, you're trying to evoke emotion from your audience, I guess, right? Or say listener for musicians, but with comedians, it's a more immediate. It's laugh. Or actually, you could evoke hatred towards your work. You could boo. So you know what? I feel the most boring comedy is the kind of comedy that does not take a side, or a stand of some sort, and I'd even argue that, in my opinion, it's comedy that I'm probably not a fan of if we aren't somehow pissing somebody off. Exactly. Yeah.
And if you do that, it's okay. There's the old phrase, the butt of the joke. Something has to be the butt of the joke. We're always making fun of something. Yeah. And as long as it's in the context of comedy, well, then we know what we know that it's joking. We know that this is comedy. But you know, I don't know if anything could be funny if it was written with an agenda to be funny to everybody. I
Yeah.
don't even know if that's possible.
No, and particularly these days, you know,
Right, right.
you know, everything's so funneled, so you just have to, I guess, be your own individual and have your own perspective of and critique of the world at hand, right? And create your
Correct.
own comedic voice, or say, and hand in hand, musical voice as well. Going back to music around that time, did you pick up any new sounds or influences that you incorporated later on in your stuff in LA? I'm sure there's some really interesting scenes out there. I haven't really explored LA myself too much, but was there any interesting sounds you were picked up in LA that were uniquely to Los Angeles, I guess, if that makes sense?
Does make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, one in particular, in the time I lived in Los Angeles, I've always been a fan of a songwriter named Peter Case.
Hmm.
Peter Case was in a band in the 80s called the Plimsouls, and the Plimsouls had a big hit song called A Million Miles Away that Peter wrote. After that, Peter went on to have, and still does, have a fantastic solo career on Geffen Records.
Hmm.
And I've always been a fan. When I lived in LA, I guess this is when I really started realizing maybe I can write songs. Peter Case taught a songwriting class at McCabe's Guitar Shop on the west side of Los Angeles. I took the class and I contacted him and said, hey, I'd like to take your class. I'm a session drummer here in town, and I feel like if I took a songwriting class, I would be a better drummer when I work with songwriters.
Hmm.
And what I was basically trying to do was say, can I come hang out in the class and not do the homework? But he thought that was a really cool motivation to take his class, and he let me into his class. But then he said, by the way, you've got to do all the homework too. So he'd give me these cool assignments to go home and write a verse, write a chorus, and we'd come to class and present our ideas to the class. And there I am presenting the first things I'd ever written as a songwriter to one of my favorite songwriters. And, you know, Peter gave me a lot of great feedback. He liked my lyrics. He just gave me encouragement that was enough for me to feel like, hey, you know, I should pursue this. I should keep doing this.
Yeah, yeah.
And it went from there. And you know, and years later, you know, I started, as I say, I started writing songs in my 30s. I started finishing them in my 40s.
Hmm.
But yeah, you know, Peter Case, goodness, I really got into, you know what, like old, weird, obscure recordings of garage, you know, 1960s garage rock bands.
Oh, cool.
You know, like all the American bands that were inspired to start a band after the Beatles exploded in 1964.
Hmm.
There was just a really cool underground kind of garage punk scene going on in Los Angeles. And I played in a garage punk band called the Buxotics.
Hmm.
And it was a great experience, and it opened me up to all kinds of new ways of thinking, listening to new bands that like the Sonics and the Standells and the Music Machine and you know, that whole era from say 1965 to 1970, and that became, I think, you know, one of the landscapes of my imagination with music, that whole culture. And you know, wouldn't you know, right when my band, the Buxotics, broke up, we were a pretty popular garage punk band at the time. Boom, here come the White Stripes. and we had a real similar kind of vibe to the White Stripes, except, you know, it was a band of four of us instead of, you know, like a brilliant guy like Jack White, who I'm a huge fan of.
Yeah, yeah.
But you know, that whole kind of culture and that scene is something I really grew to enjoy.
Cool. Wow. Yeah, no, it must have been amazing experience time there too. I guess what was the turning point to like you stayed in LA for 5 years? What was the next move? Did you go to Nashville after that, or did you go somewhere else and then to Nashville? How did you end up in Nashville? I guess from
Let's,
LA. Or
I'll tell yeah. So I would say the 5 year number was probably the amount of time I was open to auditioning and focused on screenwriting, comedy, and acting. But I was in Los Angeles from say 1997 all the way to 2010. So the time I lived in Los Angeles was about 13 years.
oh, okay.
What led to me wanting to pack up and move to Nashville? A lot of things. Number
Hmm.
one, my wife and I, our son at the time was 5 years old,
Hmm.
and it was just he was about to start kindergarten. And I remember we were looking around for homes to buy in Southern California, and just experiencing one feeling of sticker shock after another feeling of sticker shock. And one day we just said to each other as a joke, we were looking further and further outside of Los Angeles because the homes get more and more affordable the more you're willing to live deeper into the suburbs.
Hmm.
One day we just said, well, why are we even looking in the state if we're this far away from Los Angeles?
Yeah.
Well, that led to us looking at maybe moving to another state. That led to us questioning, hey, do we want to keep living here? Can we do what we want to do in another city? And we decided we could. And so for me, it was either Austin, Texas or Nashville, Tennessee. I felt Nashville was the town for me. It's more of a recording, industry-based town, whereas I love Austin, Texas. That's more of a live music kind of culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was the perfect time as a father to move my son. When a kid is 4 or 5 years old, he still hasn't really connected to the community. He doesn't have a whole lot of friends that were the center of his universe that we had to tear him away from.
Yeah.
It was the best time to move my son. And so that's really what led up to it. LA, just I shamelessly say, it was just getting too hard and too expensive.
Yeah.
It's tough. I love a lot of things about Los Angeles. It's a hard city to live in. And about a month after moving to Nashville, my heart rate dropped. I was suddenly able to relax and just afford more and do more. And that's when I really fell into songwriting after
Yeah.
being so inspired by the songwriting community of Nashville, which I've never seen in any other city.
Yeah. Yeah. And now, we'll wrap back to your, I guess, new project. Can you talk about your new album coming out, I believe, February, correct?
Correct. Yeah. February 11. The album's called Bullies in the Backyard.
Hmm.
It's 10 songs.
Yeah.
And so these songs were written some of them I started shortly after I moved to Nashville in 2010, 2011. And the way I write songs, I often start a song, I make a lot of progress, and then I put it on the shelf. And maybe I finish it next month. Maybe I get around to it in 5 years. But I'm always spinning 2 or 3 songs that I'm trying to finish. And whichever one comes to the finish line first is the one I'm going to go record.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this record in particular, what I'm most pleased about is it's 10 songs with the same musicians on every song. It's my songwriting, my album. However, it's very much a band effort.
Hmm.
The guys playing on the record are some of my favorite musicians I've ever worked with, my favorite players in Nashville. I took time to get around town and meet people. And I like to say, if I have one talent, it's that I know who to hire and I can pick the right people pretty well. And after that, I really I feel that's part of the battle. If you hire the right people, then a large percentage of your work is done.
Yeah.
These are musicians who show up and everything they play is useful.
Hmm.
The hard part with these musicians is knowing what not to use and when to press delete, because they always play something fascinating. But all the 10 songs, it very much I feel there's a lot of cohesiveness, song to song, and it's very much a band album.
Hmm. Hmm. Now, Can you reflect back on how, like, what you produced with this album comparatively to your other work? Have you noticed an evolution or a change or just a maturity in your breadth of work over the span of your musical career? Or have you? I generally like to ask this to see if
Yeah.
like musicians at your stage see that change from when they started, performing to now at this stage. Like, have you seen it evolve or just mature in a different manner from when you started?
Yeah. Um, Simply pointing back to the first album I put out of my own songs in 2017. It's a record. It's a record called Above Ground Fools. I'm sorry, I have a loud cockapoo barking over there, and the Great Pyrenees. They might come in and take over. Well,
no worries.
I feel between my first record and this record, as a songwriter, I feel there's been a lot of growth and maturity. I'm happy. I'm very happy with my first record, and I put a lot of work into it. But I really went into it very deliberately. My decision was, I want to make a record of my own songs, and I was not going. I knew, here I am in this community with these top flight songwriters. I can throw a rock up in the air, and it's going to come down on a great songwriter in Nashville. Well, I deliberately told myself I'm not going to reach out for help. I'm going to do everything myself. I'm going to figure out how to write songs. I'm going to figure out what it means to me. And my first record was very much, I deliberately wanted to just kind of walk through that confusing dark room and try to figure this out. And it was joyful, it was frustrating, it was everything, but it came together in the end. This time with this record, I just had a feeling the whole way as a songwriter, like that I have a handle on this. That's not to say that songwriting ever gets easy, but I just realized, I've got a bag of tricks. I know how to think, to thread this song together. Or I just feel like there's been, a lot of growth and improvement in my songwriting. I put a lot of work into, I spend a lot of time just studying songwriting and studying songwriters who I admire and I think are great at what they do. And I'm always curious about how do their brains work? What do they think? What did they eat for breakfast? But over the years, back to musically, when I was seeing myself as solely being a drummer who's here to help other songwriters, I know now that when I was in that role, I frequently would be in a rehearsal with a songwriter and I'd privately have an idea about how to make this song better. Or I maybe thought, these lyrics, I don't know if this guy has really thought them through. And so that was maybe the first inkling of realizing maybe I could produce people and find a way to help make things better. But when I'm in the role of being a drummer helping another songwriter, I kind of keep my mouth shut and play the drums. And I never tell anyone how to do or change anything unless they ask me or want me to do it. But I've just noticed that over time, only being a drummer hasn't been satisfying enough for me. It's what I'll always be. It's my main instrument. But I've just year after year expanded and used that to go on into other skills. So yeah, I'm a very different musician now than I was. And to your point, something I've observed about how I've grown is when I recorded the vocals on this record, well, the music I was recording to, I was the drummer on the album. I did all the drums for the record. And it's just kind of funny to sing over my own drumming and find myself as a singer going, why did the drummer play that fill? Or why did the drummer hit that crash cymbal? And wait a minute, the drummer was me. and I'll, and so it's doing other things, and writing and singing have allowed me to reflect on my own drumming and how I see songs as a drummer. And year after year that goes by, and this is a hard place to get to, but as a drummer, the way to do this is to get to the point of playing more and more simple and doing less and less in order to make the big picture of the song work. And so I feel like as I get older, I'm becoming a lot more minimalistic with how I approach my instrument, not because of I'm old and tired. It's because I'm figuring out, oh, that's really what works best. And it can often be harder to play less notes.
Oh, exactly. There's
Play, you know,
that adage of the complexity and simplicity. The minimalism. I myself, I have a kind of background in design, and in trying to simplify a design, it's very complex to get to strict minimalism. And once you have that, it's called, the gestalt, the harmony within the whole construct of the design. And that's the same thing, it seems like, with songwriting and making a really harmonious piece of work. It's starting with just raw material, weeding it down into the final minimal byproduct of all that ideation and experimentation, I guess, and working it. And that's what I've actually just noticed throughout my conversations with artisans of all crafts. It's that process of maybe starting with the idea and we molding it into a final form, which could take years,
Yeah.
And
There's no, I don't put a deadline. When I have an idea for a song that I know is a song that I can finish, I don't put a deadline on myself, but I do take very seriously that it's not going to ever come to completion if I don't force myself to just go to work. I'm not someone who only writes when I feel the inspiration. I try to write every day, and I feel some of the best songs I've written or lyrics for songs that I've written happened on days where I forced myself to write and I did not feel like writing that day. So creativity is always there. It's not something that we run out of like gas in a tank. And in fact, the more we force ourselves to sit down and be creative, I think when we don't feel like doing it, the more that will come to the surface. I mean, it all starts with a germ of an idea. And I'll quote, I'm a big fan of Roger Daltrey, lead singer for The Who. I think he's a great musician. We often don't acknowledge him as being a great musician because he was in a band with Pete Townsend and John Entwistle.
Yeah.
But I heard Roger Daltrey talking about songwriting with The Who, and he said that they always knew they had a good song or they were going to be able to finish the song if one thing was in place, as long as the little tiny germ of the idea for the song is there. And I think every good song, you can kind of walk it backwards and it gets down to one little simple idea that song is about. And as long as you're starting from there, you have something that you can finish. After that, it's no different than a sculptor who starts with a huge rock and a chisel.
Yeah.
And it's just nothing but chiseling and chiseling and chiseling until you have something that you're done, where you're done.
Yeah. A bit off topic. Any favorite contemporary writers or anybody you really stuck to reading wise throughout your years on the road, or were you just really into studying music or reading about music or writers and songwriters as well? Or did you really have any novelists?
It's funny, the deeper I got into my own development and building my own skills, I've spent a lot of time reading books that I felt would help me improve. And two writers in specific books that have impacted me personally and also professionally. I'm a big fan of the screenwriter William Goldman. He wrote Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He wrote The Princess Bride. He's written a lot. Marathon Man with Laurence Olivier and Dustin Hoffman. He's also put out about 4 fantastic books on his career in the movie business that if one is interested in movie making or how to write a screenplay, these are the books to read. So I studied him and what he does. And it's funny, everything I've done to study storytelling in a screenwriting cinematic format is precisely what falls into the way my mind works when I'm putting a song together. So William Goldman has been a huge inspiration for how to do this stuff. Another guy is songwriter Jimmy Webb. He's most famous for writing a lot of the Glenn Campbell hits. He wrote Wichita Lineman. Jimmy Webb has a book on songwriting called Tunesmith that everyone I've ever talked to who's like really a lifelong journeyman songwriter told me, you got to read the Jimmy Webb book. And everyone also encouraged me to read it with a warning. They all say, you know, hey, now the middle of the book, you just got to soldier through it because he gets really deep into music theory and the architecture of how these notes work. And it can be confusing. I've read the book 3 times and out of my love of the book, and also there's so much in it that I needed to read 3 times. I'm probably going to read it again, you know, just on how to piece a song together and how to do this. So those are 2 books that I feel have been a huge influence. And I love David Sedaris. I think he's one of the best writers out there. He always makes me laugh.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. Well, I guess with the final kind of question, any lessons you've garnered throughout your journeys and you know, journeys in this creative path you've been on that you'd pass down to your son or your family as well? Any, I guess, fables or morals you picked up, or I guess, you know, like.
I've learned a lot. Back to the band who worked with me on this album. A saying that I've learned a lot. It's a lot about developing skills on how we treat other people. If I'm in the position of being the producer and I'm the one writing the check to pay these musicians for their time and their talent, I don't feel it gives me the license to micromanage or to tell them what to do. There's a saying, you know, it's a mistake to try to put a saddle on a Mustang. I feel the musicians that I hire fall under that category of being Mustangs, and it would be foolish of me to not just let them be themselves. And it's like I say, you know, half the battle is hiring the right people. After that, the part is to just trust them and let them do what they do. And sure, occasionally you want to make an adjustment or make a note, but something I love about this album is, like I mentioned, I just accepted everything they gave me with the mindset of, if it's bugging me in a month, I'll speak up. If it's bugging me in a month, we'll correct it. But so frequently, the musicians I collaborated with turned in music that at first it surprised me very much. It was not the way I was imagining the song sounding, but I kept my mouth shut and I didn't say anything. And I just lived with it for a week or so. And after a week, they changed my mind about how to think about the song. And all of a sudden, I just couldn't live without what they had brought to the music. So it's, although my name is on the album, although I'm the sole songwriter, there's no such thing as a solo record. I just brought the tree into the house and they decorated it.
Wow. And have you guys, have you got a chance to perform live at all in the last couple of years, or have you really performed live recently, or more studio stuff?
All in the studio. Unfortunately, I love recording. I love being in the studio.
Yeah.
Probably my favorite place to be. Live music, I'm in the same boat with a lot of people. You know, a couple guys on my record play in Lucinda Williams' band. She's canceled all of her winter shows. Unfortunately, right now, I will be playing live as soon as all that gets going for everyone again.
Yeah.
But right now, I unfortunately can't give a date. I'm in the boat with everyone else I know. We've all been doing what everyone else is doing to get through this, and we can't wait to get back on stage in a club and play live music.
Now, February 11th, where can we pick up an album, or is it digital downloads, or both, or do you have vinyl? You know, how are you distributing everything?
It's going to start. It'll be available digitally: iTunes, Amazon, Apple Music, Bandcamp. On Bandcamp, that's where if one wants to order a CD, they can. works great as a coaster, works great as a shim. Come on. I don't know. But I'm going to start there. I'm a guy, I love vinyl. I would love to make vinyl. And if the demand for that ever presents itself in the future with sales or the way this is going, I'll jump right on that and love to do it.
Yeah.
But for right now, I'm just trying to go with the flow of what this young digital generation is doing and do it that way. And so it's going to be available online everywhere. February 11th, and directly, if anyone wants it, it's at my website is mattnorth.net.
Cool.
And they can get any info they need there.
Awesome. Looking forward to it, Mr. North, and I'll let you have a great afternoon. And don't pay attention to the markets too close. I don't know what's going on, but I'm
gonna take that's the best financial advice I've been given in a long time. I'm just gonna get off of here and go for a walk. I'm not even gonna think about it.
Exactly. Exactly, sir. It was a pleasure chatting with you, sir, and have a wonderful afternoon and safe afternoon as well.
All right, you too. Thank you. It's been a lot of fun talking to you.
Same to you, sir. Take care.